Betrayal, Feud.
The auctioneer's voice echoed through the old wooden hall while I stood in the back corner, my hands trembling inside the pockets of my worn brown jacket. The room smelled like dust, coffee, and old paper, the same smell our childhood home used to have in the attic during summer. I kept staring at the photo taped to the bidding board, a small white house with blue shutters, chipped paint, and the crooked porch railing my father never got around to fixing. That was our house. My house. The day was coming near I was sitting in my apartment, but now I was here, watching strangers raise numbered cards to buy the place where my mother taught me to read and my father taught me how to hammer a nail straight. My name is Daniel Carter, and I'm 34 years old. My phone buzzed again in my hand, the same email notification I had opened 20 times already that morning. The subject line read, "Foreclosure Auction, Jefferson County Property Number 1187. I didn't understand how I had missed it, or how this had happened without me knowing. Behind the auction table stood a man in a gray suit, flipping through paperwork, clearing his throat between bids like this was just another Wednesday. People whispered round me about square footage and renovation potential. To them, it was real estate. To me, it was childhood. And then I heard a familiar name. "Sale authorized by Michael Carter," the auctioneer said, adjusting his glasses. My brother, Michael. The word hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. For a moment, the room went silent inside my head. My ears rang, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Michael's name sat on the paperwork like it belonged there, like he had every right to sell the house without even telling me. I remembered the last time I had spoken to him, 3 months ago, a short phone call while I was driving back from a job site. He had sounded normal, calm, casual. Nothing about selling the house, nothing about an auction, nothing about betrayal. A woman in front of me raised her bidding card. 75,000, the auctioneer called. The numbers sounded small compared to the weight of the memories being traded. I stepped outside the building, the cold Ohio air hitting my face like a wake-up slap. My breath came out in white clouds while I leaned against the brick wall, trying to steady myself. Michael had always been the responsible one, the older brother, the careful one, the one Mom trusted with paperwork after Dad died. I was the one who left. At least, that's how the story always sounded when Michael told it. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't an email. It was a text message from Emily Carter, Michael's wife. "Daniel, please don't make a scene inside. Michael said this is already hard enough." I stared at the screen. Already hard enough? The words twisted something deep in my chest. Inside the auction hall, the gavel struck once. Going once, the sound pulled memories out of me like gravity.
Our father standing in the driveway with a toolbox. Michael mowing the lawn in crooked lines. Me carving my initials into the porch step and getting grounded for a week. That house wasn't supposed to disappear. Not like this. Not without me. Another bid echoed through the doorway. 80,000! I walked back inside slowly, like I was stepping into a funeral I hadn't been invited to. Michael wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. He never liked confrontation. He liked decisions made quietly, behind doors, signed in ink no one else saw until it was too late. I found an empty chair in the back row and sat down, my knee bouncing uncontrollably. I kept thinking there had to be a mistake, a legal error, a misunderstanding, some explanation that would make this feel less like betrayal. But the paperwork on the table said otherwise. "Final call," the auctioneer announced. My hands clenched. I thought about raising my hand, about stopping everything, about asking why my own brother hadn't called me. But I didn't move, because deep down, I already knew the answer. Michael didn't think I was part of this family anymore. The gavel slammed down. "Sold," And just like that, my childhood home belonged to someone else. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, staring at the floor, feeling something inside me settle into a quiet, permanent ache, the kind that doesn't go away, the kind you carry. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't really about a house. It was about everything Michael and I never said after our parents died. It was about the distance that grew year by year. It was about the day I left home and the story Michael told everyone about why. That auction wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It was the moment I finally saw it clearly. And to understand how my brother sold our childhood home behind my back, you'd have to go back 6 years, to the day I left Ohio, and why Michael never forgave me. 6 years earlier, I stood in the narrow hallway of our childhood home holding a single duffel bag, listening to Michael argue with our mother in the kitchen. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and the house creaked the way it always did when storms rolled through Jefferson County. The wallpaper near the stairs was peeling again, curling outward like it was tired of holding on, just like us. Back then, I was 28, working as a maintenance technician for the County Transit Authority, a job that meant fixing buses at 4 a.m. and crawling under machines that smelled of oil and burnt rubber. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, the kind Dad used to respect. Michael, on the other hand, had stayed close to home. He worked at a regional bank as a loan officer, wore pressed shirts every day, and spoke in calm, measured sentences that made people trust him. Michael understood stability. I understood escape. Ever since Dad died from a stroke 3 years ago, the house had felt less like a home and more like a responsibility. The mortgage payments, the property taxes, the repairs, everything slowly transferred to Michael because he lived there with Mom. I sent money when I could, but I didn't stay. And Michael never forgot that. "Daniel thinks money fixes everything," Michael said in the kitchen, his voice low but sharp. Mom sighed. "He's trying. That's not the same as being here." I leaned my head against the hallway wall and closed my eyes. This conversation had become routine. Michael believed presence meant love. I believed survival came first. The truth was, after Dad died, I couldn't breathe in that house anymore.
Every room reminded me of something unfinished. Dad's boots still by the back door, his tools hanging in perfect rows in the garage, the dent in the drywall from the time Michael and I threw a baseball indoors. Memories became weight, and Michael carried them like duty. One night, a month before I left, Michael found me sitting on the porch steps. "You're running," he said. "I'm working," I replied. "You're leaving me with everything." I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how to explain the exhaustion sitting inside my chest. "You think staying here makes you the hero?" I asked. "No," Michael said. "It makes me the son who didn't disappear." That sentence stayed with me longer than any argument we'd ever had. 2 weeks later, I accepted a job in Columbus, supervising maintenance crews for a private logistics company. It paid more than I'd ever earned. I told myself it was temporary. I told Michael I'd send money every month. I told Mom I'd visit often. Only one of those promises lasted. Moving day was quiet. Michael helped carry boxes without speaking much. He moved efficiently, like he was completing a task he didn't want to think about. At one point, he handed me a small cardboard box. Inside were old photos. "Take these," he said. "You'll forget otherwise." "I won't forget," I replied. But he didn't look convinced. Life in Columbus moved faster. Work started before sunrise and ended after dark. I supervised 12 mechanics, handled parts orders, and learned how to manage people twice my age. For the first time, I felt useful, necessary, respected. That feeling became addictive. Phone calls home became shorter, visits became rarer. Months passed without me noticing. Michael never complained directly. That was his way. Instead, Mom would mention things casually during calls. Michael fixed the roof last weekend. Michael handled the property tax office. Michael stayed overnight at the hospital. Each sentence was gentle. Each one still felt like a comparison. When Mom got sick the first time, pneumonia, I drove back immediately. Michael was asleep in a chair beside her hospital bed when I arrived. His hair looked thinner, his face older. "You made it," he said. "Of course I did." He nodded, but the silence between us felt crowded. Later that night, we sat in the hospital cafeteria drinking burnt coffee. "You don't know how bad it's gotten," Michael said. "What do you mean?" "The house, the bills, Mom's health. You could have told me." I did. The words weren't angry, they were tired. After Mom recovered, I tried to help more. I sent larger payments, called weekly, visited twice that year. But something had already shifted. Michael spoke to me like a distant relative instead of a brother. Polite, controlled, careful, like he expected me to disappear again. Then came the winter that changed everything. Mom's second illness was worse. Heart complications. Hospital stays stretched into weeks. Michael took unpaid leave from work. I couldn't. My job depended on showing up every day. That was the logic I used. That was the choice I made. The night Mom died, Michael called me at 2:14 a.m. I still remember the exact time because I stared at the phone before answering. "Daniel," he said, voice hollow. "She's gone." The drive back to Jefferson County took 3 hours. Michael had already signed paperwork when I arrived, arranged the funeral, called relatives, met with the pastor, everything. He stood beside me at the service, but we didn't speak much. Grief doesn't always bring people together. Sometimes it shows how far apart they already are. After the funeral, we sat in the living room surrounded by sympathy cards. "What happens to the house?" I asked. Michael shrugged. "I'll handle it."
That sentence again. I should have asked more questions. I should have stayed longer. I should have made myself part of the decisions. But I left 2 days later. Work, responsibility, distance, excuses that sounded reasonable at the time. Over the next 3 years, Michael stayed in the house alone. I visited only twice. Each visit felt stranger than the last. The house looked smaller. Michael looked older. Our conversations grew shorter. At some point, we stopped talking about anything real. Just weather, work, traffic, safe topics. The last meaningful conversation we had happened the previous summer. Michael called while I was changing a tire at work. "I'm thinking about selling the house someday," he said. "Someday," I replied, distracted. "Yeah, not now, just thinking." "That makes sense." I wiped grease from my hands and switched back to work mode. That was the moment, the quiet decision point, the moment that would later replay in my head 100 times, because I never asked when, why, how bad are things. I assumed someday meant years away. Michael meant something else entirely. 3 months later, the auction notice arrived in my inbox, and by then, the decision had already been made. That was the distance between us, not anger, not hatred, just years of silence, responsibility, and assumptions stacking up like unpaid bills, and eventually, something had to break. The first time I confronted Michael about the house, he didn't apologize. He didn't even sound surprised. I called him from my car in the parking lot outside the auction building, my hands still shaking from hearing the gavel fall. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Daniel." His voice sounded normal, too normal. "You sold the house," I said. A pause, then a slow exhale. "Yeah." That was it. No explanation, no warning, no emotion, just yeah. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I tried." "When?" "You remember last summer." "That wasn't telling me you were selling it," I said. "That was you saying someday." "Well, someday came." The calmness in his voice hurt more than anger would have.
You had no right to do that without me, I said. You did, legally and practically. The words felt rehearsed, prepared, like he'd expected this call eventually. I grew up in that house too, I said. And I stayed, Michael replied. Silence followed, heavy, unavoidable. You think sending money every few months made you part of this? He continued. That's not fair. No, Michael said quietly. What wasn't fair was watching Mom get worse while you kept choosing work. The accusation landed exactly where he intended, because part of it was true. I did what I could, I said. You did what was convenient. His voice didn't rise. That was Michael's way, controlled disappointment. I couldn't lose my job, I replied. I couldn't leave Mom alone. Another silence. Two brothers standing on opposite sides of the same memory. The house was falling apart, Daniel. Roof damage, plumbing issues, property tax notices. I took a second loan just to keep it going after Mom died. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. You never told me that. I stopped explaining things to you years ago. That sentence hurt more than the auction. When did you decide? I asked. About 4 months ago. 4 months? I repeated. I needed the money to clear debt, and I couldn't live there anymore. Every room felt like a hospital. For the first time, I heard something human in his voice, exhaustion. You could have called me, I said again, weaker this time. I did call you, Michael replied, just not about the house. I didn't understand at first. Then I remembered. 3 missed calls one night in November. I had texted back the next morning. Busy day yesterday. Everything okay? His response was simple. Yeah, just checking in. I never called back. The realization made my chest feel hollow. Not betrayal. Consequence.
I wasn't trying to hurt you, Michael said. I know. And I didn't think you'd care this much. That sentence cut deeper than anything else. After the call ended, I sat in the car for a long time. The auction building emptied behind me. People drove away with paperwork and plans, and I sat there thinking about how relationships don't usually break in dramatic moments. They erode quietly, conversation by conversation, missed call by missed call, year by year. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the auction office confirming the sale. Inside was a small check, my half of what remained after debts were cleared. The amount was smaller than I expected, but that wasn't what bothered me. It was the memo line. Property distribution, Carter residence. The house reduced to a transaction. I called Michael again that night. I got the check, I said. Okay. Is this everything? Yeah. Another quiet pause. Then he added, I kept Dad's toolbox for you. That caught me off guard. You did? Yeah, figured you'd want it. I do. Come by this weekend, he said. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Driving back to Jefferson County felt different without the house waiting at the end of the road. Michael now lived in a small apartment 15 minutes from where we grew up. When he opened the door, he looked older than I remembered. Grief ages people unevenly. Hey, he said. Hey. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before he stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was clean, but sparse. No family photos, no decorations, no signs of history, just furniture and silence. Dad's red metal toolbox sat on the kitchen table. Michael slid it toward me. I oiled the hinges, he said. I opened it slowly. Inside were Dad's wrenches, screwdrivers, and the measuring tape he always kept in his back pocket. The smell of metal and machine oil hit me instantly. For a second, I was 10 years old again, standing in the garage. Thanks, I said quietly. Michael nodded. We sat at the table drinking coffee that tasted too strong. I didn't think you'd come to the auction, Michael said. I didn't know until yesterday. He looked surprised. I thought Emily told you. No. He rubbed his forehead. Then that's on me. Not quite an apology, but closer. I drove past the house once before closing, Michael said. Didn't stop. Why not? Couldn't. I understood. Later that afternoon, we walked to the parking lot together. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, Michael spoke. "I wasn't trying to erase you," he said. "I know. I just couldn't carry it anymore." I nodded. For the first time, I believed him. That was the silent reckoning. No shouting, no dramatic forgiveness, no resolution. Just two brothers standing in a parking lot, realizing grief had shaped them in different ways, and neither of them knew how to fix it. That night, I placed Dad's toolbox in the trunk of my car. Not the house, not the porch, not the attic, just the tools. Some things survive differently than others. The story of the house didn't end at the auction. It spread. Not dramatically, not intentionally, just the way things do now, quietly, through screens.
About 2 weeks after my visit to Michael's apartment, I was sitting on my couch in Columbus scrolling through Facebook after work. The TV played in the background, muted, while I absent-mindedly flipped through posts from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Then I saw it. A photo of our childhood home. Blue shutters, crooked porch railing, fresh white paint. The caption read, "First home renovation project begins. Feeling blessed. Jason Miller." Jason Miller. A guy 2 years younger than me from high school. Someone who used to ride his bike past our house. Someone who now owned it. My stomach dropped. I clicked the photo. Comments flooded underneath. "Beautiful place. Great investment. Didn't that belong to the Carter family? Thought their mom lived there." And then, "Oh yeah, Michael sold it last month." The words sat there in plain text. Public. Permanent. Simplified. Then came the tag. Jason had tagged Michael, and Michael had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. That was all. No explanation, no story, just a digital confirmation that the past had been handed off. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry, just empty. The house was now content, a renovation project, before and after photos, weekend progress updates. Memory turned into property. The following weekend, Jason posted a video walkthrough of the interior. The camera moved through the living room slowly. The walls were stripped to drywall, the carpet gone, the kitchen cabinets removed. Everything exposed. The place looked smaller than I remembered, almost fragile, like memory had been exaggerating its size all along. The comments were supportive and cheerful. Then came one that stuck out. "Did the Carter brothers help with the sale?" Someone replied, "Don't think Daniel was involved." Another comment, "Families grow apart." And then, "Sad but happens." Strangers summarizing my life in 3 sentences. I closed the app, but the story kept moving without me. 2 days later, my cousin Rebecca Collins called. "I saw the house post," she said. "Yeah? Why didn't you say anything?" "There wasn't anything to say." "Well, people are talking." Of course they were. Small towns feed on unfinished stories. "What are they saying?" I asked. "That Michael had to handle everything alone." I didn't respond. "Some people think you didn't want the house." "I didn't," I said honestly. Rebecca paused. "Then why does it bother you?" That question stayed with me after the call ended. Because it wasn't the house. It never was. It was the realization that Michael and I had been telling different versions of the same story for years, and eventually, his version became the public one. Not out of cruelty, just proximity. He stayed, I left. That was enough. A week later, Michael texted me a link. It was Jason's renovation video. Underneath, Michael wrote, "Kitchen used to look worse than this." That was it. No tension, no explanation. Just a shared memory. I replied, "Dad would hate the new cabinets." Michael responded with a laughing emoji. It was the first time we'd joked in years. That became our new rhythm. Not reconciliation, not closeness, just small, careful communication.
Over the next few months, Michael sent occasional updates, a photo of Dad's old neighbor waving from across the street, a picture of the town's 4th of July parade, a random memory about Mom burning Thanksgiving rolls once. Nothing heavy, nothing about the past, but not silence either. One evening in late fall, Michael called unexpectedly. "I drove by the house today," he said. "And?" "They replaced the porch railing." I smiled. That thing was falling apart for 20 years. "Yeah," Michael said. Still felt strange. We sat in silence on the phone. Not uncomfortable, just shared. "I don't think selling it fixed anything," Michael said. "I know, but I still think it was the right call." "I think so too." And for the first time, those words felt true. Winter came. Life moved forward. The toolbox sat in my garage, used more often than I expected. Fixing things became calming, predictable, honest, unlike memory. One Saturday morning, while tightening a loose bolt on my car, I realized something simple. Michael hadn't really betrayed me, and I hadn't really abandoned him. We had just survived grief differently, and neither of us knew how to translate that into words. The house was never the problem. The silence was. Months later, I drove through Jefferson County again for work. Without planning to, I turned onto our old street. The house looked different. New porch, new paint, new mailbox. But the maple tree in the yard was still there. Tall, unchanged, quietly holding time. I didn't stop the car. I didn't need to. Some places don't belong to you anymore, but the version of you that lived there still exists somewhere in memory, and that's enough. Michael texted me that night. "Rebecca said you were in town." "Yeah." "You stopped by the house?" "No." "Me neither." Another small moment of understanding. That was our new equilibrium. Not perfect, not repaired, but real. Two brothers connected by history instead of expectation. I stopped waiting for Michael to see my side, and he stopped expecting me to relive the past. That quiet acceptance did more than any apology could. Years later, when I think about the auction, I don't remember the gavel. I remember the smell of dust, the sound of strangers bidding, and the moment I realized family isn't defined by what you keep, but what you learn to let go. If you've ever felt like your family rewrote a story you were part of, you're not alone. Sometimes people don't understand our choices because they only see the distance, not the reasons. And sometimes closure doesn't come from being understood. It comes from understanding yourself. Not every relationship breaks loudly. Some just change shape, and that doesn't always mean they're lost.